The 96 hours since the Titan was last heard of has now elapsed. So most people are assuming that the emergency supplies of breathable air on board that submarine have now expired. It's fair to say that the mood amongst many people watching and involved in this rescue operation has become even more bleak.
Stockton and I met in 2009, and we were both driven by the similar attitude about exploration. We grew up wanting to be astronauts, and both of us had our eyesight go bad, and so we couldn't become pilots and then become astronauts. But we were still driven by this need to explore. And somewhere around 2007 and 8 is when both of us independently came across this world of human submersibles, basically going underwater into the deep pressure of the ocean. So for us, it just seemed like a natural fit to be able to start a new business focused on taking humans underwater. But the key, and it's interesting that now as we sit here in 2024, we can look at what was going through our heads in 2009, because every startup needs to exist for the purpose of solving a problem. And in 2009, the problem that Stockton and I saw is still around today in 2024, 15 years later. And that is that humans do not have access to the deep oceans. There's no ready fleet of submersibles that can take people underwater, at least to a significant depth. So for example, the average depth of the ocean is roughly 4,000 meters, which is ironically about where the Titanic is, the wreck of the Titanic. Today, just like 15 years ago, there are only 6 subs in the world that are capable of going to 4,000 meters, even to the average depth of the ocean. And those subs today are in the hands of 5 national governments. The Chinese have 2, the Japanese have 1, the French and Americans each have 1. And the 6th sub is in the hands of a billionaire who, to his credit, is using it for exploration and science. So that's great, but there's 8 billion people on this planet, and those subs carry 3 people. Actually, the billionaire sub carries 2 people, and one of them has to be the pilot. And so there are very, very, very limited opportunities for humans to go underwater and explore or study the world's oceans. And to us, that just seemed like a worthwhile problem to try to solve. The exploration community is a little bit strange in that we go in knowing that there's going to be risks, we know there's going to be setbacks, and when setbacks do occur, instead of deterring explorers, it seems to motivate explorers to continue forward and continue with their pursuit. Certainly it causes you to pause and reflect and make sure that you're still committed to what you're trying to do. It certainly calls for checking exactly what happened, what caused the setbacks, so you can learn lessons and apply them going forward. But once you've done that, you're fully committed to continuing to go forward. And that seems to be even more heightened in a perhaps macabre kind of way. It seems to be even more heightened when that setback leads to fatalities. Because I think part of it is the rest of the exploration community wants to make sure that the legacies of the people who lost their lives are honored by continuing to go forward. You don't want their lives to be lost in vain. And in the space community, we went through that with Apollo 1 and then with Challenger and Columbia. And now in the underwater community, we're going through this with the OceanGate accident from last year. I left OceanGate in 2013, in large part because Stockton and I had kind of planned the growth of the company to go in 3 phases. We figured phase 1 was going to be an operational phase where we were going to learn about underwater operations by buying a used sub and operating it. Then we were going to shift to 2 engineering phases. One would be a shallower diving sub as a test bed for phase 3, which was going to be the deeper diving sub. His expertise was an engineer. So his expertise was going to be in phases 2 and 3. My expertise was more in operations. And so my expertise was going to be more relevant in phase 1. So in 2013 is when we came to that transition from phase 1 to phase 2. So I ended up leaving the company and turning it over to Stockton so that he could continue through the engineering phases of phase 2 and 3. Now, the reason I give you that background is what I wanted to do when I left the company was to do more exploration expeditions. A problem with the sub causing fatalities or injuries. He was very much focused on safety. I think the next regret he would have is the company not continuing operations and not being able to keep going and getting beyond Titanic, because Titanic was really just a means to an end for the business. It was really to get to a point where the subs would be chartered by people all over the world to do all sorts of interesting projects and learn more about our oceans. And so I think one regret that's been in the aftermath of last year's accident is that the company has basically ceased operations. And so that would be, I think, another one of his regrets. The other thing that came out was these other, James Cameron and these other guy wanting to build subs to go down to the Titanic. And there's different ways to take that kind of news from people. But for me, as co-founder of OceanGate, the way it hit me was like, dang it, like it's still a problem. Like we still can't find a sub to go just 4,000 meters. I mean, the deepest part of the ocean is 11,000 meters. And the average depth of the ocean is 4,000 meters. And we can't even find a sub that anybody can just take and go to the Titanic. And that's 15 years of hard work, and it's still a problem. So anyway, I think that's a problem that's still worth solving, and hopefully someone will solve it in the near future.